afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. What you see before you is the Fort York Fife and Drum Corps. Now, normally throughout the summer, we animate a War of 1812 era fort in downtown Toronto called Fort York, but we're here as part of the muster this weekend. Now, it's interesting, actually, this regiment, despite having spent the first half of 1815 at Fort York, they spent the latter half of that year and into 1816 stationed here at this fort. And there's some interesting stories about their time here, which I'll be sharing over the course of the demonstration. Now, I'm the drum major, and in the next few moments, I'll tell you a bit more about the roles of these musical warriors behind me, but there'll be time for any questions you might have as well at the end. So the instruments we carry, by virtue of their volume, were important tools of communication during the War of 1812. As you might imagine, on a loud or smoky battlefield, drummers often acted as stretcher bearers, helping evacuate the wounded. But they could also relay basic orders through a system of signals or calls, like advance, retreat, or ceasefire. They could do this either on the bugle or on the drum. And you might imagine being behind the lines playing these signals would mean that being a drummer was a safe and easy job, and that's not necessarily true. For instance, two of our drummers at the Battle of Chrysler's Farm, on appropriately enough, the 11th of November 1813, were critically injured. Now, we only know with the type of injury for one of them, a drummer by the name of Nicholas Timhorn. He was about 21 years of age, came from what's now Latvia. He was born in Riga, then under the control of the Russian Tsar. Somehow found his way to Canada, where he was injured in a battle fighting for the British Army against the Americans in what's now Canada. Both of them, him and his counterpart, the other individual who's wounded, a man named Jacob Sieth, were both sent back to England, where those two drummers spent a year in hospital recuperating. One died 2 years later at the end of 1815. We're not sure if it was directly as a cause of the injury or some other hospital infection, whereas Nicholas Timhorn was never able to walk again, but was pensioned off the army and spent the rest of his life living off that pension. Maybe he went back to Latvia. But as you can imagine, whilst everyone likes to focus on battles, most of a soldier's time was actually spent not on the field, but in forts much like this one, engaged in a dull routine of drills, parades, and tedious manual labor. And the fifes and drums play specific tunes throughout the day, both in camp and in a garrison like this, to help soldiers know what they're supposed to be doing throughout the day. And so they play the reveille in the morning to wake soldiers up. They play the Pioneers' March to assemble soldiers for work parties, and they play the retreat and tap tune at the end of the day to send soldiers back to barracks for the night. And several times a day, both in the morning and the evening, soldiers would be formed up for parade, and sometimes there would be ceremonies like guard mounting, where they'd be changing a guard, so that guardhouse there every 24 hours, and it was important to let everyone know what was going on, but also during this long and tedious process, as you can imagine, forming up maybe 500 to 1,000 men might be, a full regiment, where you first form up into your squad, and then your company, and then the regiment. It takes a while, and it's nice to give soldiers something to listen to. So for that reason, Fifes and Drums put together a series of tunes known as the Troop. And there were many different versions of this, but the one we'll play for you today was named in honor of the Duke of York, Commander-in-Chief of the British Army. Duke of York, short troop, drum steady after action, run, drums, ready, drums, beat. inevitably, some grew tired of the drudgery of soldiering and decided not to play by the rules. Drunkenness and desertion were big problems, especially in this regiment, where in the latter half of 1815, almost 1 in 5 men deserted. Many crossed the river, thought they could get a much better job, get higher wages as a laborer on the American side of the river. One particularly embarrassing case actually concerns the drum major himself, a man by the name of Augustus Welling. Now, he was the son of the Sergeant-at-Arms of the Quebec legislature, who himself had been a Hessian soldier in the war. We're not quite sure what he thought of his son's conduct, but we do know that Augustus Welling, on the morning of 28th September 1815, the drummers woke up, couldn't find the drum major, and perhaps because many of them were French-Canadian, they might have said, "Où est le tambour major?" And they, unbeknownst to them, whilst they knew that he deserted, they didn't realize on the very same day he'd crossed the river and had enlisted into an American artillery unit at Fort Niagara. Now, he served in there for about 6 months, got promoted to corporal, but evidently then got bored of the land of the free, and then deserted back across the river and rejoined the Canadian Fencibles. Now, we don't have the punishment record for that era for the regiment, so we don't know how he was punished at all if he was in this regiment, but we do certainly know he did not get his job back as drum major. And then, true to form, 6 months later, unsurprisingly, he deserted again. So the next song we'll play for you is the Rogue's March in honor of Augustus Welling, and this was actually a song that was played for drumming out ceremonies when a soldier might be dishonorably discharged for any offense that they would do. Now, the drummers in the regiment were actually the ones tasked with maintaining harsh levels of discipline to ensure that people didn't get any bad ideas and follow Augustus Welling's example. And so what they would do is they would flog the bare backs of drunks, thieves, and deserters, the drummers themselves, and this ceremony would take place in front of often the entire regiment, and a humiliating song like the Rogue's March would be played to remind soldiers that it probably wasn't a good idea to follow such bad example. Drums to the echoes. Attention! Rogue's March. Drums. Ready? Drums. Beat. Keep soldiers out of trouble by helping them unwind and relax in barracks after a long day, or by buoying spirits during a long march or a harsh Canadian winter. Dancing and singing were particularly popular pastimes and actively encouraged by the military authorities as a way of keeping soldiers from less constructive activities. In fact, General Brock famously here at this fort built a handball court for his men to keep them out of the den of all wickedness, which was the town of Newark, now Niagara-on-the-Lake, where you could pick up some ice cream and wine if you want. Historically, dancing and singing were seen as constructive activities the soldiers could do, along with sports, along with fishing and hunting, to keep them to ensure that idle hands would not make the devil's work during all that time they had to themselves after and in between parades. But the music you would have heard at a fort like this 200 years ago would have reflected the diverse variety of soldiers in the Canadian Fencibles. And surprisingly, you had men, about half the regiment of the Canadian Fencibles were born in what's now, were French Canadians from what's now Quebec, whereas the rest were born in England, Scotland, Ireland, the United States, and even further afield. As I said, one of our drummers was Latvian, the other our bugle major actually came from Prussia. And so all of these soldiers would have brought their traditional culture and folk tunes, and these could have been played to remind soldiers of home, be it Montreal or Aberdeen. So the next song we'll play for you is called Flowers of Edinburgh, which represents some of the different musical traditions that have come along. It's Scottish folk tune. Comes to the attention, flowers, drum. Ready, drum, beat. not have a monopoly on military music, and many individual soldiers in their spare time picked up an instrument, like the flute, the tin whistle, or fiddle. There was one Scottish Highlander in the Canadian Fencibles who spent the entire war playing the bagpipes in Quebec as part of a recruiting party, to let everyone know, I suppose in the loudest possible manner, that the army was looking for new volunteers. The regiment's officers also privately financed a band of music, paying individual soldiers to pick up orchestral-style instruments like clarinets, flutes, and bassoons. Now, this regimental band would have played alongside the fifes and drums on parade, but also entertained at various dinner parties and balls for officers and local civilians. But the final song we'll play for you is actually one you might recognize. It was written by George Frederick Handel in the mid-18th century, and became, by the War of 1812 time period, one of the most popular pieces of military band music. So popular, in fact, it may well have been played at Fort York in April of 1815, when General Murray came to town to review the regiment, and the band was looking for something a bit more formal and patriotic to enliven the ceremonies. See the conquering hero comes. Comes here. Action! On! Drums. Ready! Drums. Beat! That concludes our music demonstration for today. There's plenty more on the schedule for the rest of the Fife and Drum Muster. We'll be sticking around for a minute or two. We'll play one more song. You're welcome to come up, talk to me directly, take photos with us. But for right now, does anybody have any questions? Well, I guess I've done my job. As I said, feel free to come up and talk to us directly. We're going to play one last song called Bath Medley. Thanks so much and have a great day in Fort George. Action! Ready? Drop. Beat! Ready? On the advance, immediate. Rachel's forward at the ordinary. March!